It's a question that many NFL fans have asked over the years. Have the Green Bay Packers wasted the career of their Hall of Fame quarterback, Aaron Rodgers? After all, despite having Rodgers under center for the better part of 12 seasons, the Green Bay Packers have appeared in just one Super Bowl. Was it the incompetence of Mike McCarthy? Was it Ted Thompson sitting on his hands and not doing anything in free agency? Was it Don Capers' defense collapsing? Or was it Aaron Rodgers himself not showing up in the postseason? There's plenty of blame to go around, and this video hopes to look deeper into that. So you better watch this video or else I will find you, and I am not joking. After sitting behind Trump supporter / dick pic sender Brett Favre for 3 years, Aaron Rodgers finally got his chance to start full-time in 2008. Faced with the pressure of living up to the legend's shadow, Aaron Rodgers held up pretty well individually, throwing for over 4,000 yards and having a passer rating of over 93. But even though Rodgers showed that he wasn't a scrub, the Packers took a big step back as a team. After being on the brink of going to the Super Bowl just a year earlier before dick pic sender Favre threw an interception in overtime of the NFC Championship game, the Packers fell to 6-10 in Rodgers' first year as a starter and missed the playoffs entirely. The Packers' 2008 record could be seen as deceiving though, because they had a positive point differential and had a lot of bad luck late in close games. Many people expected the Packers to regress to the mean in a positive way and win more games the following year, and they were right. In Rodgers' second season, the Packers went 11-5 and made the playoffs. Rodgers also showed that his first-year success wasn't a fluke, throwing for over 4,400 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. He was quietly emerging as one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but people were still curious to see how he would respond once he got to the playoffs. Unfortunately for Aaron, the way his defense performed in his playoff debut would become a pattern throughout the rest of his career. Despite starting off slow, including throwing an interception on his first ever postseason pass, Aaron Rodgers ended up balling out throughout the entire game, throwing for over 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and rushing for another. But sadly, that's not what people remember most about this game. What they remember most is the way it ended, which was Rodgers getting strip-sacked on a missed face mask call on a fumble that was returned for a touchdown by Arizona's Carlos Dansby. Despite having one of the greatest playoff debuts of any quarterback in NFL history, Rodgers came out as a loser. It's obvious that for this game, most of the blame lies in the defense. I mean, after all, Arizona quarterback Kurt Warner threw more touchdowns than incompletions. What made this defensive collapse particularly disappointing was how stout the Packers' defense had been all regular season long. They even had the Defensive Player of the Year in Charles Woodson, although Darrelle Revis probably should have won it, but that's neither here nor there. The facts are, in the regular season, the Packers' defense was 2nd in yards allowed per drive and 7th in points allowed per drive. Arizona was a talented offense, no doubt, but did anybody really expect this Packers defense to give up 45 points on 10 possessions? I don't think so. And Rodgers isn't completely blameless. After all, in overtime, he overthrew a wide-open Greg Jennings on the play before the game-ending fumble that would have ended the game most likely for the Packers. But still, to say he deserves blame for the team losing after putting up 5 total touchdowns and 45 points offensively is just fucking stupid. One thing the loss to the Cardinals did show, however, was that Aaron Rodgers could perform great in the postseason, which is the mark of any all-time great quarterback, except for Tom Brady. And when you talk about all-time great postseasons by a quarterback, Rodgers' 2010 postseason is certainly up there. The 2010 Packers went on a miracle run to their first and only Super Bowl appearance in the Rodgers era. Capped off with one of the greatest performances in Super Bowl history by a quarterback, Aaron Rodgers won Super Bowl 45 MVP. Going into Super Bowl 45, the talk was whether the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were looking for their 3rd ring in 6 years, would become the next dynasty. But after being taken down by Green Bay, the dynasty talk shifted to the Packers. And it wasn't difficult to see why. The Packers had what every franchise hopes to have: a young, proven superstar quarterback to lead their team for the next decade. But Rodgers wasn't the only talented member of the Packers either. After all, having Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, Jermichael Finley, adding Randall Cobb through the draft on offense, along with their defensive studs like Clay Matthews, B.J. Raji, Charles Woodson, and Nick Collins, there was no doubt in many people's minds the Packers would get back to at least 2 or 3 more Super Bowls with Rodgers. But, as everybody knows, that hasn't been the case. The Packers' 9-year title drought hasn't been without its positive moments. After all, the 2011 season saw the Packers go 15-1. Rodgers went from being a superstar quarterback to a god-level quarterback, putting up arguably the greatest statistical season by any quarterback in NFL history. And although there were warning signs throughout the season that the Packers defense might be dog shit, the Packers offense was so explosive that it didn't even matter. So heading into the divisional round against the New York Giants, people expected the Giants to put up a gritty, tough fight, but eventually the Packers would overwhelm them with their talent. But that's not what happened. Going against what everybody expected, the Giants waltzed into Lambeau and basically kicked the Packers' ass. For really the first time all season, Aaron Rodgers looked mortal, missing several throws, but Rodgers also wasn't helped out by his receiving core. After all, the Packers finished with 6 drops, which was tied for the most by any team in any game during the 2011 NFL season. And just like in 2009, the Packers defense once again decided not to show up. Unlike 2009, however, the 2011 Packers defense playing like shit in the playoffs wasn't surprising to anybody. During the regular season, this was a team that finished 31st in yards allowed per drive and 23rd in points allowed per drive. That's why if I had to blame anybody the most for this game, it would once again be Dom Capers' defense. Giving up 37 points at home is never acceptable, especially when 7 of those points come on a Hail Mary at the end of the first half, which was a mental backbreaker for the Packers. I don't speak for all Packers fans, but I think I feel pretty confident in saying this goes down as the second most heartbreaking playoff loss in the Rodgers era. And even after this extremely disappointing loss, there was still a lot of hope for the future in Packerland. After all, fluky shit like this happens all the time in the NFL postseason, being its single elimination. Rodgers was still entering his prime, all of the core players were still there, the future was still bright in Green Bay. The 2012 Packers went 11-5, won the NFC North, and secured a wild card playoff spot. And though most teams would take that in a heartbeat, the 2012 Packers were a few plays away from being 13-3, and in all likelihood they probably should have been 12-4 at the least. The Hail Mary debacle in Week 3 at Seattle with the replacement refs cost them a win, and the defense cost them another win in the final week of the season when they made Christian Ponder look like a reincarnation of Joe Montana, giving up 37 points and wasting an incredible performance by Aaron Rodgers. So instead of being 13-3 with a first round bye, the Packers were 11-5 in a wild card, and after dismantling the Joe Webb Vikings in the wild card round at home, they had to go to Candlestick to face the 49ers and a famous kneeler. And just like in Rodgers' first 2 career playoff losses, the Packers defense completely shit its pants once again. After starting off on a high note with a 52-yard interception return by Sam Shields, the Packers finished giving up 45 points on 11 possessions. The 49ers racked up 323 rushing yards, 181 of those by Colin Kaepernick, the most by a quarterback in NFL postseason history. In total, the Packers defense gave up 579 yards. It's obvious they deserve most of the blame for this loss. Rodgers wasn't great, but he wasn't bad either. He would have had to have played the greatest game by any quarterback in NFL history for the Packers to have even had a chance to win on this night. So it's difficult to blame him or any other of the offensive players for the loss. The 2013 season was a bit of a lost season for the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, as Rodgers missed essentially half the season with a broken collarbone. Despite this, the Packers won the NFC North on a brilliant last-second play in the final week of the season against the Chicago Bears on the road. Thanks to winning the division, the Packers secured a home playoff game in the wild card round. And even better, they would be playing the hated 49ers once again, earning a chance at revenge from the previous year. And although this wouldn't be a blowout like the year before, once again the Packers came up short. Unlike Rodgers' first 3 playoff losses, the defense didn't completely collapse. They gave up just 23 points. But that doesn't mean that Rodgers still didn't get screwed by his defense in the end. After leading a game-tying field goal drive to tie the score at 20 with 5 minutes left in the game, Rodgers never saw the ball again, as his defense promptly gave up a 14-play, 65-yard field goal drive which ended the Packers' season for good. A brutal dropped interception early in the drive by Packers cornerback Micah Hyde basically sums up Rodgers' playoff luck outside of 2010. But Rodgers isn't completely blameless in this loss either. He didn't perform bad enough to lose the game by himself, but he didn't play well enough to win it by himself either. But still, he did show up late in the third and in the fourth quarter, which is when quarterbacks are judged the most for their clutch time play. Sometimes the ball just doesn't bounce your way, and in this case, that's what happened to the Packers. Unfortunately for the Packers, though, this would be the first of 3 straight seasons which would end this way, with Rodgers leading a game-tying drive and never seeing the ball again. The 2014 season is a bittersweet one for Packers fans. The sweet portion is that the Packers went 12-4, earned a first-round bye, die, and Aaron Rodgers went back to being the best quarterback in the world, earning his second MVP award. And after a controversial ending to their divisional round win against the Cowboys, the Packers went to Seattle to face the defending champion Seahawks. And that's where the bitter part of the bittersweet label comes in what is unquestionably the most heartbreaking playoff loss for the Packers in the Aaron Rodgers era, and maybe in Packers history overall. Any football fan already knows how this game went. The Seahawks played as badly as humanly possible for the first 56 minutes of this game. Russell Wilson threw 4 interceptions, there were fumbles, but the Packers didn't capitalize quite as much as they needed to early on, with several different drives stalling deep in Seahawks territory where they settled for field goals. Despite these extremely questionable coaching decisions by Mike McCarthy, the Packers still looked like they had the game in hand, up 19-7 with under 5 minutes left. After being conservative with 3 straight Eddie Lacy runs, the Packers punted the ball back to the Seahawks with just under 4 minutes remaining. Russell Wilson finally woke up and led the Seahawks on a great touchdown drive, which ended with him running for a 1-yard touchdown score. Still, with just 2 minutes remaining and the Packers up 19-14, all it would take was one more onside kick recovery for the Packers to secure their spot in Super Bowl 49 against the Patriots. And then Brandon Bostic happened. Bostic was a hardly used backup tight end who was on the hands team for the onside kick as a blocker, but he was feeling himself and decided to go up to try and catch the kick, and he botched it, which resulted in the Seahawks getting the ball back. All it took was 3 plays for the Seahawks to score again on a 24-yard touchdown run by Marshawn Lynch. The Seahawks then converted an extremely fluky 2-point conversion, which, as wild as it was in real time, it became even more important after the fact, as it gave the Seahawks a 3-point lead. Touching the ball for the first time since being up 19-7 just a few minutes earlier, Aaron Rodgers led the Packers on a game-tying field goal drive once again. This gets forgotten about because of how the game ended, but still, it was an extremely clutch drive that set up an extremely clutch kick by Mason Crosby to tie the game and send it into overtime. But remember that 2-point conversion I just talked about a few minutes ago? Yeah, if the Seahawks hadn't converted that fluky-ass 2-point conversion, this drive would have won the Packers the game instead of sending it into overtime where they never touched the ball again offensively, as on the very first possession, their defense gave up a game-losing 35-yard touchdown pass to Jermaine Kearse. Out of all the playoff losses in the Rodgers era, this is probably the playoff loss that Rodgers is most responsible for. It should be noted that he was playing in an extremely hostile environment on a bad leg and still came through in the clutch once again to lead a game-tying drive. But he still threw 2 bad interceptions and was off on a couple other throws that would have given the Packers an insurmountable lead. But it would be incorrect to say that Rodgers was the most to blame. After all, as I alluded to earlier in the video, Mike McCarthy's extremely questionable coaching decisions came into play as well. 2 different times the Packers had the ball 4th and 1 on the Seahawks 1-yard line, and McCarthy decided to settle for field goals. When you had the league MVP, albeit on a bad leg, still, you have 1 yard to gain. Stop coaching like a pussy and just go for it. Even if you didn't get it, you're putting the Seahawks on their own 1-yard line and having them go drive 99 yards for a score. Just horrible coaching. Then there's obviously the Brandon Bostic factor and the fact that if he didn't try to play a hero, Jordy Nelson most likely would have caught the onside kick and the Packers would have won the game. It's tough to blame the defense for this loss because after all, they played extremely well for the first 3.5 quarters, but still, it's tough to ignore that for the last 3 possessions, they completely disappeared. Considering this was a very well-balanced Packers team, this will easily go down as the biggest missed opportunity in Rodgers' career. The 2015 season was a challenging season for the Packers. They started off 6-0, Aaron Rodgers was once again in the MVP conversation, and then things just kind of fell off the rails. The Packers went just 4-6 over their last 10 regular season games to finish the season 10-6. 6 of those losses were 3 home games to their divisional opponents, the Lions, the Bears, and the Vikings. And if it weren't for a fluky Hail Mary touchdown pass to beat the Lions on the road, maybe the Packers wouldn't have even made the playoffs. But still, they made the playoffs as a wildcard team, and they dispatched the Washington redacted in the wildcard round on the road to set up a divisional playoff game against the Cardinals in Arizona. Cardinals were 13-3 and once again had a high-powered offense led by MVP candidate Carson Palmer. The game ended up being a slugfest, fighting back and forth. Considering the subpar supporting cast Rodgers was playing with, Jordy Nelson was out for the year with a torn ACL, Devontae Adams wasn't playing, Randall Cobb went out early in the game with an injury. This could actually be seen as one of Rodgers' more heroic playoff efforts. And everybody remembers how the game ended, with Rodgers throwing a Hail Mary bomb to Jeff James bananas to tie the game. But if you haven't figured it out already, because I already gave it away a few minutes ago, the Packers once again never saw the ball in overtime, giving up an 80-yard touchdown drive on the opening possession. For the third straight year, Rodgers' late-game heroics were all for naught. Rodgers gave a respectable effort despite the lack of talent around him. The defense wasn't horrible until crunch time once again, and Mike McCarthy wasn't horrible either. Sometimes you get into the postseason and you lose to a better team, and in this case, that's pretty much what happened. But still, it was tough to feel like we hadn't been teased with that incredible ending and then not getting to see Rodgers touch the ball again. The Packers were now 5 years removed from their lone Super Bowl win with Rodgers, and Rodgers was suddenly getting up there in age, turning 32. The stellar receiving core that he broke into the league with was all but gone besides Jordy Nelson, and the relationship between Rodgers and coach Mike McCarthy was growing stale. Considering all these factors, it's honestly amazing that in 2016, the Packers even made it as far as the postseason. The 2016 season saw the Packers start 4-6 in their first 10 games, and basically missing the playoffs seemed like it was inevitable. But then over the last 6 games of the year, Aaron Rodgers went on arguably the greatest stretch of quarterback play the league has ever seen, leading the Packers on a 6-game win streak and clinching the division with a win in Week 17 at Detroit. Rodgers' stellar play continued into the postseason when the Packers dismantled the Giants at home in the wildcard round, followed by a classic win on the road to upset the Cowboys in the divisional round. Shout out to the Jared Cook throw and the Mason Crosby clutch field goal. With what once looked like a lost season, the Packers were suddenly 1 game away from the Super Bowl once again, this time going on the road to play the Atlanta Falcons. Coming off of a huge upset win over the 1-seed Cowboys, there was a lot of belief that the Packers might actually pull a 2010 and go all the way. But it didn't happen. Simply put, 2016 NFL MVP Matt Ryan and the entire Falcons offense tore the Packers defense a new asshole, dropping 44 points on 9 offensive possessions. Rodgers, for the most part, played pretty well. He led the Packers in field goal range on their opening drive, which ended with Crosby missing a makeable field goal. Then on the next possession, Rodgers led them deep into Falcons territory, where fullback Aaron Ripkowski then fumbled, turning the ball over. In the blink of an eye, the Packers were down 17-0, and Rodgers hadn't even done anything wrong. Followed by some drops and an arm punt, aka an interception on 3rd and long late in the half to make his stats look worse, Rodgers really deserves no blame at all for this loss. The blame, once again, falls on his defense completely crapping their pants. Seriously, how the fuck did Don Capers keep his job so long? Did they not realize that 2010 was a complete fluke defensively? As with the previous year, the Packers just lost to a superior team, but that doesn't mean that the loss still couldn't be seen as heartbreaking. To get on the doorstep of going back to the Super Bowl once again just to fall short in spectacular fashion takes a toll on somebody, and there's no doubt it would take a toll on Rodgers' psyche moving forward. 2017 was a lost year for the Packers as Aaron Rodgers broke his collarbone for the second time in Week 6. With Rodgers missing effectively 10 games, the Packers finished 7-9, missing the playoffs entirely. Rodgers came back against Carolina late in the season with the Packers sporting a 7-6 record, but it was obvious that he wasn't at full strength, throwing a career-high 3 interceptions, although he still was leading the team on a game-tying drive when a fumble by Geronimo Allison all but ended their chances. The 2018 season was depressing, to say the least. Early in the season opener against Chicago, Rodgers hurt his leg once again, and it looked like he was going to miss the entire season. Instead, he came back into the game for the second half and produced one of the greatest comebacks in football history. But that would be the high point for the Packers in the 2018 season. Rodgers was never 100%, and the feud between him and coach Mike McCarthy had gotten to the point where it was unmistakable. The Packers finally fired McCarthy late in the season, and the Packers missed the playoffs for the second straight year with a 6-9-1 record. Despite the recent doldrums, there was some optimism that hadn't existed in a long time in Packerland heading into 2019. With new head coach and Ryan Reynolds impersonator Matt LaFleur at the helm, people were expecting a rejuvenated season from Rodgers. And although Rodgers' individual statistics didn't improve from the year before, the Packers' team record did. The Packers went 13-3 and got the 2nd seed in the NFC. Following a vintage Rodgers performance in the divisional round against Seattle, the Packers were once again back in the NFC Championship game, this time against an old foe, San Francisco. But like Rodgers' first 3 career NFC Championship game appearances, this one would be on the road in hostile territory. And much like the championship game against Atlanta a few years prior, the Packers were overwhelmed right from the start. The 49ers got constant pressure on Rodgers in the first half, while the defense couldn't stop a fucking nosebleed. By the time it was over, the Packers defense had given up 285 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. All in all, the Packers defense gave up 37 points on 9 possessions. Disgustingly bad. There's no doubt that the defense is the biggest reason why the Packers lost this game, but that's not to say Rodgers isn't blameless either. He had a horrible first half, which definitely helped put the Packers in a hole early. A bad interception and a botched snap contributed to that. But there have been plenty of examples of quarterbacks who started off games slowly in the playoffs before winning the game in the end because their defense kept them in it. But in the case of Aaron Rodgers' 2 most recent NFC Championship game losses, his defense played so poorly the entire game, it's almost like it didn't even matter how he played. Sure, the game might have been closer had the Packers scored a touchdown or 2 in the first half, but their defense never showed any signs of being able to stop the 49ers. I mean, Jesus, Jimmy Garoppolo only threw 8 passes the entire game. The 49ers literally told the Packers what they were going to do, and the Packers still couldn't stop it. Dom Capers wasn't around anymore, but still the defense continued to crap its pants at the worst possible time for number 12. Now that we've covered each of Rodgers' 8 playoff losses in detail, it's time to look at them as a whole. My conclusion is that the biggest catalyst for the Packers not going back to the Super Bowl in the Rodgers era is easily the Packers' defense. In Rodgers' 8 playoff losses, the Packers have given up 36.4 points per game. I don't care who you are as a quarterback or how good you are as a quarterback, when your defense is consistently giving up that many points, you're not going to win many games. And it's not as if there's just 1 or 2 outlier games influencing that average either. In 5 of Rodgers' 8 playoff losses, his defense gave up 37 points, and in 3 of his 8 losses, his defense gave up 44 or more points. In Tom Brady's entire NFL career, his teams have never given up more than 42 points in any game, and it's happened 3 different times to Rodgers in the postseason. You're probably saying, well, for 5 of his 8 playoff losses, the defense completely sucked, but what about the other 3 losses that are still remaining? Well, like I said earlier in the video, in all of those 3 losses, Rodgers led a game-tying drive in the 4th quarter just to never touch the ball again. What does this mean? Well, it means that basically Rodgers isn't to blame for any of his playoff losses. How am I supposed to blame a guy for losing when his defense gives up almost 40 points a game, or when he leads a game-tying drive and never even gets a chance to get the ball again? Keep in mind that in all 8 of Rodgers' playoff losses, the Packers' offense has scored at least 20 points. And while you could say that in some of those losses, those points came in garbage time, it's not as if the Packers' offense has ever been shut down for an entire game in one of Rodgers' playoff losses. In the end, shitty defense and some shitty luck is the biggest reason why Aaron Rodgers, the most talented quarterback to ever play, only has 1 Super Bowl ring. Nobody's saying he's been perfect in the postseason, but he's been pretty much as good as any quarterback that's ever lived. And things that are out of his control consistently seem to go against him to prevent him from winning more. Remember, football is a team sport after all. The team I root for is the Eagles, but if the Eagles can't win, I will always root for Aaron Rodgers because he's one of my favorite quarterbacks ever.